Hi, everyone. I chose to research and teach you all about Jean Piaget, and he lived from 1896 to 1980. So we can go ahead and jump in. Piaget's early life, he was born in Switzerland to Arthur Piaget and Rebecca Jackson in August of 1896. His father was a professor of medieval literature, and his mother was the daughter of a prominent French family. From a young age, he was fascinated by nature with a specific interest in shells and mollusks. And around the age of 10 or 11, he published his first article, and by 15 had published many more. So he was very much into the kind of teaching others from a early age. He was best known in the zoological community as he made a name for himself because of his articles on malacology. I think I'm saying that right. And that's the study of mollusks. So he was not into education. He wasn't into development of children and how their intelligence worked until a little bit later in life. He really was focused on nature and how science worked in nature at the beginning. He enjoyed his study of mollusks so much that he worked part-time at, I'm not even going to try and say the name, but it was a museum of natural history in Switzerland, and it helped classify the collection of shells. So he worked there when he was 15 all the way until college. And then as he grew older, he started receiving instruction in religion. His mom allowed him to learn about religion, and he really struggled with the juxtaposition of religion and science, which ultimately kind of put him into the direction of learning about the intelligence of humans and how things work. Education, after he graduated high school, he attended college at the University of, I can't say it, Nuktal, where he continued his studies in natural sciences. So at this point, he was still interested in, the earth and mollusks and just really nature as a whole. He went on to earn a doctoral degree in 1918, but due to his declining health, he had to relocate to the mountains for a year to recover from tuberculosis. So he got to live in the Swiss Alps. He then returned to university after, where his true foundation for the work in biology, psychology, and philosophy would take shape. So after his bout with tuberculosis is when he returned to university, and he kind of decided maybe this isn't exactly what I want to do with natural sciences, and he kind of moved towards the biology, psychology, and philosophy working together. And in 1919, Piaget left Switzerland to work at the Sorbonne, I think I'm saying that correctly, which is the leading university in Paris. And that is where he learned about prominent psychology and what it looks like in humans. Moving into his early contributions, right after he went to the Sorbonne, while he was working there, he also worked in 1920 at the Binet laboratory. And Binet is famous for the intelligence tests, kind of the first ones to test IQs. And it was here that Piaget truly discovered his curiosity for children's intelligence. He disagreed with the way that the young children's intelligence was being measured and tested by the Binet test. He thought that it wasn't testing what they were able to reason. It was only testing their ability to apply their knowledge. So he was much more interested in how children reasoned instead of just being able to boom, 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 apply what they learned. Piaget was the first to conclude that children think and reason differently than adults, which was a very radical idea at the time. He took what he learned at the laboratory when he returned to Switzerland in 1921, and he worked at the J.J. Rousseau Institute in Geneva. So he took everything he figured out and learned from the Binet laboratories and what he thought about reasoning and how children's brains worked, and he took it to this institute in Geneva back in Switzerland, and he worked with a group of researchers and school-age children to study and understand how children and young people reason. Through this early research, he gathered the material for his first 5 books on the psychology of children and solidified his spot as one of the most influential psychology professors, engineers, inventors in the world. All of this happened before he was married with children. So in 1923, he married his wife, Valentine Châtenay, who was a research student at the Institute. They weren't originally working together, but they met at the Institute. And in 1925, they welcomed their first child, a daughter, and then another daughter in 1927, and finally a son in 1931. And the whole reason I'm talking about his children is because his children were the main focus of his study for his research in child psychology. He studied his own children from infancy to adolescence and used his findings to build the majority of his body of work on children's intelligence. So he really took his work home and he said, I'm going to use my own kids as my research. And that's what he did. As the years went by, Piaget was obviously one of the most successful psychological philosophy. I'm not going to butcher the word, epistemologists, which is the term he coined for himself. In 1929, he was awarded the post of director at the International Bureau of Education, and he held this post until 1967, so 40 some years. His prolific career spanned over 60 years. He worked at many educational institutions, and he sat on many different boards of organizations dedicated to the study of psychology, and he was awarded several honorary degrees, including but not limited to Harvard and the Sorbonne. He furthered his career by becoming a professor of genetic psychology and opened the International Center for Genetic Epistemology, and he coined that phrase. He even served as the Swiss delegate to UNESCO, furthering his legacy as a public servant devoted to the study of children's education. Moving back into some contributions that he had later in life, specifically genetic epistemology, he was so interested in the development of knowledge that he created the term genetic epistemology, which in short means the study of development of knowledge. Piaget believed that children develop schemas based on their sensory motor interactions with the environment around them. And this starts as early as, 0. As a child uses their schema to test the environment around them, they will either assimilate or they will accommodate. And these two working together help children to adapt to their surroundings. If a child uses a learned schema on a new toy or object and it fits, it is assimilation. So the way I view this is a mom is looking at her child, see a horse, and the mom says, oh, a horse is a mammal. And then the child puts the horse into the group with the other mammals. If a child uses a learned schema on an entirely different object and it doesn't fit, the child will accommodate the schema to fit the new experience. So if a child looks at a zebra and says that it's a horse, the mom would say, that's a zebra, not a horse. Then the child would have two different pictures and would know that a horse and a zebra are different creatures. So he accommodated his schema to fit the new object or experience. And assimilation and accommodation, they must work together in order for a child's mind to correctly balance with the environment that they interact with. And for the perfect balance, Piaget called that equilibrium. So they have to work together to find that happy medium. Most famously, Piaget is known for his stages of development, and I think we all learned this when we had to do childhood development class in our first college courses for education. And he believed that children actively build up their knowledge about the world around them. They don't passively wait and let others fill the knowledge in for them. They are the ones who are responsible for building on the knowledge that they come into contact with every single day. So I included a graphic here. And the first stage is sensory motor, which is birth to 2. The second stage is pre-operational from 2 to 7. The third stage is concrete operational from 7 to 11. And the fourth stage is formal operational from 12 on. And then I broke them down just a little bit more. So the sensory motor stage is from 0 to 2. A child's universe exists in the here and now. So the child can only perceive what is right in front of them. When the object disappears, the object no longer exists. And Piaget characterizes this stage by a child experiencing the world through movement and senses. They only know and see what they are aware of in front of them, and they're not capable of perceiving through a different lens. They don't have that, the object's right in front of them. Great, they see it. The object's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. They're not able to know, the object has just been moved out of my vision. And he argues that children's behavioral characteristics are most striking during this time of life. So you can really see a child's, behavior come to be during this time in their life. Next is the pre-operational stage, and it happens from 2 to 7. The child develops the ability to think about things symbolically. And language matures at a quicker rate, and children develop memories to help them with concepts old or new. During this stage, a child is egocentric, meaning it's hard for them to perceive things from another point of view. So they see things the way they want to. They can't see it like through somebody else's eyes. And this stage also deals with imaginative play and creating norms or rules while navigating social structures. So a lot of this time is spent, looking around, figuring out how to navigate a social situation, what rules are, how we follow them, why we follow them, and like looking at how other children also do it to kind of create those norms on what's right and what's wrong. Piaget's conservation theory can also be evidenced in the preoperational stage as well. And this is because children can be misled due to lack of logical abilities. Children are still forming logic at this point. And so the conservation theory, I attached a YouTube video if anybody wants to go in and look at it, is basically, you show them 2 glasses of water. The glasses are the same at the beginning. And you ask which one has more, and they'll say, no, they're the same. And then you pour one into a taller glass so that there's less space. There's more space for the water to fill. And then you have the short one with the water all the way up and the tall one with the water down here. And you ask which one is shorter, which one has more. And they'll say that one has more because it looks like less space, like more space has been filled. And so they're not able to understand just because the space that the object or liquid has been in has changed doesn't mean that the actual amount of it has changed. And that is something that is evidenced in that YouTube video if y'all want to go watch it. Next is the concrete operational stage, which is 7 to 11 years. And in this time, children begin to show concrete and logical reasoning. Piaget found this to be a turning point in a child's life as the child can work things out internally in their brain rather than physically try things out in the world. They can, think in their brain, okay, well, maybe I don't need to do this, this, and this. I can do this instead of having to literally act out a scene in front of them. In this stage, children understand conservation and can apply the principle to numbers, mass, and weight. So, the conservation stage from before has now been mastered in this stage. And children become less egocentric and begin to think about how others might feel about a topic. So this is when kids kind of figure out, oh, there's people that have other feelings that I might not feel the same way about. And I maybe need to think about it and understand how it would make them feel. So that's a big part of this age as well. Finally, they move into the formal and operational stage around 11 or 12. And this is when adolescents begin to gain the ability to think abstractly. Formal operation thought does not require a concrete action. A child can divide a fraction in their head without having to physically divide it in real life. So that's their ability to reason abstractly. And a child in the formal operational stage possesses the ability to deal with hypothetical problems and provide multiple solutions quickly. So they can think of a problem and come up with a solution in their head. And lastly, children in this stage possess higher order thinking abilities. This is when they can think about politics. This is when they can think about a hypothesis, come up with, some solutions, test the solutions. Did they work? Did they not? This is, middle school, high school, which is exactly what these bullet points said. And this is what Piaget obviously was most famous for. And to this day, it's held up to the point where we still use it and still learn about it in our child development courses in college. For his educational implications, I wanted to use this quote. It says, the principal goal of education in the school should be creating men and women who are capable of doing new things, not simply repeating what other generations have done. I thought that really kind of struck a chord with me, considering we're trying to always better our teaching and, our strategies and everything else so that our kids can learn and do new things, not just produce what's been done in the past. Although Piaget was not considered an educational reformer because he wasn't directly in the education world, and he didn't directly work with children, his work was the first to provide accurate research regarding the development of knowledge in children. And because of Piaget's work, educational reform was made possible and became widely accepted by governments around the world. Teachers today still use Piaget's guidance to implement more exploratory and creative strategies to better fit the needs of their students' intelligence. Looking at Piaget's impact in my classroom, he believed that children should receive education with environments, curriculum, materials, and instruction that are consistent with physical and cognitive abilities of the student, as well as their social and emotional needs. So one thing that came to mind for me was first grade math, which I've talked about before. My students are in their final year of the pre-operational stage, and they're entering into their concrete operational stage. So to meet their cognitive needs, I need to provide a range of strategies in order for them to find the best fit. And most will fall in concrete or representational stage, but some are ready for abstract. So those really high up their thinking kids. So, building concrete with cubes first. Then once they've mastered, building with cubes, putting them together, counting the total, they can move on to representational, where they draw circles. So for their first part, draw circles. For their second part, draw squares. Count all, write your answer. And then for the last stage, abstract, that's when they could just simply add in their head, or we use a strategy called use your muscle, where you say 6 plus 3, 6, 7, 8, 9. They have 3 fingers up, they stop. They know 9's the answer. So, he really focused on kids being given the instruction with their curriculum and materials and everything else to match where they are cognitively. So to have these different strategies available for the kids in my classroom who are in different cognitive ability levels, it works really well. Another example would be first grade phonics. In the pre-operational stage, he believes that children need physical hands-on experience. So from August to May, my students will be learning CVC words like cat, all the way to words with digraphs, blends, vowel teams, and other patterns like ship, train, and clump. And that's a big jump. So one way that I think Piaget has impacted that in my room is I give students letters to manipulate, which allows them to physically see the sounds change and move. And this goes along with the math implication in the same sense, like physically allowing them to touch the M and push it up and say mat, because then they're physically looking at the letter, touching the letter, and making the sound. So it's giving them that tactile physical while also working on the phonological and phonemic. Because of this hands-on practice, when the student enters the concrete operational stage, they're no longer going to need the physical letter and can instead envision the letter in their head, put the sounds together without having to actually touch it. So the physical aspect is really important for kids in the pre-operational stage. Jean Piaget in his work, he helped educators move towards student-centered learning rather than teacher-led learning. The teacher should facilitate while the student should explore and engage with the learning environment around them. And I think we still all truly believe that to this day. As he stated, you cannot teach concepts verbally. You must use a method founded on activity. So letting our kids do project-based learning, letting our kids, hands-on activities and participate in those types of experiences, that's what they're going to ultimately learn from, not us sitting up there teaching, just talking. Piaget helped reform education before education reform was even proposed. His work proves to stand the test of time, and he continues to provide educators with guidance in creating a classroom environment that's developmentally appropriate for its students. In his final years, he passed away on September 16th, 1980 in Geneva, Switzerland. Up until his final days, he was still conducting and publishing research. This man was a lifelong learner. He never stopped. He published over 50 books regarding children's intelligence and psychology, along with contributing to hundreds of other works throughout his life. Piaget, honest to me, is the original education reformer to whom we owe a great deal of thanks for paving the way for other reformers throughout the years. So I hope I taught you guys something about Piaget. He really did care about us understanding children's reasoning and how to meet them on their level and give them what they need in order for them to be successful.